you also get frustrated when people link your players away.
It's a fact.
From Newcastle United. I walked into the office today and I said to you, have you said your goodbyes to Alexander Isak? And I really caught you off guard, didn't I? I really did.
Big time. In fact, when you say people, it's mainly you, actually, Harry. Really. No, of course, he's going to be linked away, and obviously you have to look at it as a huge compliment. And obviously, he is. I mean, he's up there as one of the best number 9s in football at the moment. I'd say he is probably the best overall number 9. I've got to say, his form's not been amazing recently. To be fair,
he wants to move. That's
not
right.
saying he wants to go at all. No, not at all. But I think it's more just frustrating when there have been some supporters who talk about Isak as if he already plays for their club. That becomes strange. Of course, they want him there. That makes a lot of sense. But Isak himself has never, he's never said, "Oh, I want bigger things. I want to move to this club." He says he doesn't really talk about his future, think about his future. He's happy with Newcastle. He's happy banging in goals against Arsenal every time he plays them. So at the moment, it's looking good. I think if Newcastle get Champions League as well, they've already said he's not for sale. I can't really see him moving this summer. You never really know, but I'd be really surprised if he does move on, mainly because of that price tag, and secondly because, well, he beat a club in the Champions League anyway.
I was having this conversation with Kwaku, who's a regular on this show as well, yesterday, and I was saying, like, even if you want Alexander Isak, the price point makes it pretty much impossible. Now, obviously, Newcastle qualifying for the Champions League or not makes a difference, I think, in terms of appeasing those players and making sure that you're satisfying their ambitions. But Newcastle setting that price tag on him, I mean, he's important to them. 150 million, which is what I've read, that's over the top to me.
Why?
Because there's very few, if any, players in world football that are worth 150 million. In the age of PSR, 150 million is a ridiculous price.
Yeah, but it makes him, so highly valued that he won't be able to move anywhere else.
But
that's surely the point of the price tag.
Is he as good as 150 million pounds?
Well, we just said he's the best number 9 in the world, isn't he?
Is he?
He's young.
Best number 9 in the world.
Who else is then? Don't tell me Mikel Merino.
Kylian Mbappe plays at 9 for Real Madrid.
Yeah, he's obviously a brilliant player. Yeah, of course. But Isak, when Isak is at his best. You've seen it with your own Arsenal defence, mate. He runs defences ragged. He's got.
I'm not denying he's a top player,
but don't you think though that the reason for that price tag is to put other teams off, essentially?
Yeah, but it's not.
That's why he's so highly valued. It's basically Newcastle saying, do you know what? There's no point you even trying. And actually, do you know what's so funny is that PSR has worked against Newcastle so much. In recent times, no major signing for the last 3 windows. But actually, when it comes to this kind of scenario, and that's why I think they've done really well to hold on to those stars for this long, and they've kind of sacrificed making other signings because they've gone, we don't want to make a big sale, we want to keep these players, they're proven, they've done well for the club. So let's hold on to these rather than sell one for a big fee and then maybe spend that money elsewhere. So actually, having held on to that and achieved a lot during that time, it has worked. So it's paid off. It's a bit of a risk, but it's paid off because it looks like they'll be holding on to their stars and maybe this summer spending a bit more.
It's one of those classic cases of where the club gets to set the valuation based on how much that player's worth to them specifically, but it's not really a true reflection of the player. Because, listen, I think...
Well, how much is he worth then?
80 to 100?
80
to 100 feels about right for a player of that quality.
You're saying that Declan Rice would be a more important player to Arsenal than Alexander Isak by £20 million.
But I'll tell you that Arsenal overpaid for Declan Rice. I think, anybody that you're paying sort of £100 million for, you got to really kind of sit back and think about whether they're worth that. But it's about the selling club in that circumstance, isn't it? Look at Jack Grealish to Manchester City. To Villa, he was worth 100 million. He's not a £100 million player. But sometimes when you're that selling club and you have the power like Newcastle do here, you can inflate that value. I would say that with Isak's injuries as well, that does worry me a little bit, and that would put me off of going to that 150 mark. But I'm not saying he's not a top player, but the valuation...
He's way more than 80 million, though. He is.
It depends, doesn't it? It depends.
There's such a premium though, because if we had a conversation about who Arsenal would want as their next number 9, the list would go Isak, probably Gyökeres, and then Sesko, right? And they're very good players, Sesko and Gyökeres, but who else are you kind of going for? In terms of number 9s that are in inverted commas available, because for me at the moment Isak isn't available out of those three. Maybe potentially his head's turned, but as I say, I don't think it would be this summer. But I think because of that puts that price higher up. He's more than 80 million. I'd be disappointed if Newcastle only got 80 million if they were eventually to sell Isak, which they're not going to. So
it's kind of supply and demand, isn't it? It's one of those. Yeah. Obviously, big game coming up on Sunday, because for Arsenal, they're really keen to keep hold of second place. I think they need to show everybody that even when they've had a bit of a dip this season, even with all the difficulties, this new version of Arsenal, Mikel Arteta's iteration of Arsenal, their bottom line is second. That's a pretty good place to be. But obviously Newcastle have the opportunity to kind of leapfrog them and take that position off them between now and the end of the season. From a Newcastle fan's perspective, you couldn't have asked for a better campaign, could you? Ending that trophy drought and then still in the hunt for second.
It's absolutely ridiculous, Harry, isn't it? It's second place in the league. And then, you can sit there and go, well, they were never in a title race. I don't think that matters. And I think coming second matters, especially to someone like Newcastle. If Man City come second in the season they've still had a very poor season because they're miles off Liverpool, maybe winning an FA Cup. But, they've all said it. Pep Guardiola said it. It's a horrendous season. I agree with you that it matters for me that Arsenal finish second. I do think that if they drop into third, it literally displays how they've gone backwards this season, in a big way. But Newcastle coming second is it is a mark of a season, like you said, that couldn't have gone better, especially with the summer they had as well. There are a few people heading into this season kind of saying they weren't quite sure. Newcastle hadn't made major signings. Would they be able to repeat that trick of getting into the Champions League when they didn't have European football the last time round? I'm interested in your thoughts on Eddie Howe now, Harry, because
I knew this was coming.
Well, let's be fair, because you for some sort of reason have in the past kind of questioned his abilities as a manager, whether he can take Newcastle to a next level. Now you've seen the way that this season has gone, whether Newcastle gets second or not, it looks like they're probably going to finish in the Champions League places. So has it changed your mind at all on him?
Yeah, to a point. I think the first time Newcastle qualified for the Champions League, I thought that was remarkable. But we saw the following season them struggle. And
they came seventh.
Yeah, but to go from fourth and being in the Champions League spots, was it fourth or third they finished? I'm not even sure. Fourth. To go from fourth to then dropping down to seventh, it's a dip, right? It's a drop-off. And I know they had Champions League football to contend with, and I know that year they had a lot of injuries. But I always think the sign of a club moving forward is when they can qualify for the Champions League consistently. Because we've seen it before. We've seen teams do it on a one-off occasion. You get that cash injection. You think you're moving forward, and then all of a sudden you get brought back down to earth, and it's very difficult to go again. Where I will give Eddie Howe immense credit is that even without major investment in the squad, he's been able to refresh things and go again. And therefore, I'm inclined to look at that season in between and say, okay, the injuries cost him or the circumstances cost him. And I'm willing to give him that credit for sure.
I think as well, the one thing I'd say about that in-between season is I would have said, I reckon, at the start of that season that we would probably come 6th or 7th. I think it's such a massive task to get back into the Champions League. The consistency you have to show in the league is ridiculous. And I think, you're talking about a squad that was, and still now, 6, I think, of the 14 players that played in that cup final were there pre-takeover. It's still a squad that's developing and hasn't had the same investment that across the board that we might have been seeing. So I kind of thought maybe that season could have gone better, but probably par for the course. They were unlucky to miss out on Europe. Maybe it was a blessing in disguise because it's let them to have this season this time around where they've won a trophy and hopefully getting into the Champions League place. I'm still saying hopefully because it's still touch and go, but they can finish second, they can still finish 6th. So we'll see how it goes. It's a big old game for Arsenal, hopefully getting our 4th win of the season there.
You'd love that, wouldn't you?
But to be fair as well, it's funny because you used to say about Eddie Howe that you couldn't see him taking Newcastle beyond and on to that next step. Slightly ironic now, that, isn't it, as an Arsenal fan, with old Arteta in charge?
Oh, no, come on, hold on a minute. I just sat here and gave Eddie Howe a free pass for that season that he completely messed up, right? Because I said injuries.
So which season am I giving a free pass to Arteta for? Is it
this one?
Yeah, okay.
And the irony of it is, right, and I was having this conversation with someone earlier and it really riled me up. So you've just pushed the button there, Mr. Clink. Like, Arsenal this season, right, have dropped off in the league. There's no doubt about that. But they're still, at the moment, second is in their hands. okay? They're on course to finish second at the time of us speaking today. They made a Champions League semi-final. They made a League Cup semi-final.
Who did they lose to?
Yeah, we know.
Okay.
The point is, it's not as bad a season as people are trying to make it out to be. The fact is that when you raise the bar at a football club, there's going to be that expectation. And I find it ironic that when Eddie Howe's Newcastle dropped off after making the Champions League, everybody went, well, the squad's not good enough. And, you know, he's done a cracking job and it's fine. The injuries have cost him and they give him a pass. But with Mikel Arteta, who's even less experienced, who also had very poor investment in his team last summer and in January, has managed to sort of maintain the level to a point and nobody wants to give him any acknowledgement for that.
Who's a better manager then? Howe or Arteta?
Well, Mikel Arteta's a better manager.
How can you make that argument?
Because he's managing one of the top clubs in the country.
And they've won nothing. They've won one FA Cup.
What had Eddie Howe won before this season?
He's won the League Cup though now.
But, okay. Mikel Arteta's won
finishes.
the FA Cup.
Yeah, but pound for pound, Howe's done a better job.
But Mikel
He's
Arteta's
also beaten
won the FA
Arteta
Cup
5 times out of 9 since he's been at Newcastle.
What's that got to do with it?
It's a head-to-head record, isn't it?
It's a bogey team. You can have bogey teams that are in lower divisions. It doesn't mean anything.
To be fair, we always lose to Brighton.
There you go. There you go. The point I'm making is that Arteta's won an FA Cup in a really short career. Eddie Howe's won the EFL Cup. Congratulations to him. Not taking it away from him. But Mikel Arteta is a top manager. And all these Arsenal fans that sit there and go, get him out. I guarantee you when he leaves Arsenal, he'll pick up a top job.
What do you want to see then next season as an Arsenal fan? What is the bar that Arteta has to hit?
Well, he's got to deliver one of the big ones. I think you should start the season now with that expectation as an Arsenal fan because the club's moved forward so much. But at the same time, you can't ignore circumstance and you can't ignore context. So you go into the season, you lose Odegaard for a few months. Then you've lost Saka for a few months. He's lost Havertz for a few months. He lost Martinelli. He lost players in midfield he's been without. He's been without key defenders. Ben White's been out for most of the season. And then he's not had cover to mess around at the back. He's had so many problems. And I just think it's wrong to dismiss him because of this season without accepting and acknowledging that there have been other issues there.
Yeah, but it's now the clock's ticking. Surely the clock is ticking. It's been a long old time now. What is it? 4 or 5 years? You know, do you know what I'm going to ask you? Because you mentioned that he's got to win one of the big ones,
Go on.
Right? So does that mean that you would take not being in a title race, maybe coming 3rd or 4th, but you do win an FA Cup?
No,
would you take that?
This is the thing. People will not be satisfied. People in Arsenal circles can sit there and say, it's about silverware, but there's only 2 bits of silverware that would appease them. Winning a League Cup or an FA Cup, they'd just turn around and say, well, that Arsene Wenger was doing that at the end. That's what they'll say. So for me, it's got to be one of the big ones.
Are you confident then that they can actually win the Premier League next season?
For sure. I'm confident that they can do it if the investment is there in the summer.
Yeah.
Because it's quite clear there's a
Without
few
Isak up front, that's going to be tough, isn't it?
He's coming, I'm telling you.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.